yeah, it's like this never-ending race, isn't it? Of I need to do better for the sake of doing better, or I see this creative doing this, so I have to do something to match that to be assured that I've met my full potential. But when it's all about me, what I've realized for myself is when I think like that, that's when I feel the most under pressure. But recently, I've been thinking more, even in regards to this short film that I'm working on. Obviously, the pressure which I talked to you before pressing record on this conversation was the timeline, the deadlines, and I think you relate to working to deadlines and how sometimes we feel like deadlines are a cap on our creativity. But even within that, there's the opportunity, because creativity is an interesting thing where it's stronger in a sense the more restrictions we have. It helps us to do more with little. So there's that aspect of it, but also helping to relieve the pressure is thinking about the impact of those who are watching. And even whilst I'm doing this project, doing this podcast and hearing the few messages I've had about it, it's encouraging me, because it's like, it's not just about me. I'm not just doing this to promote my film, or to earn money through podcasting, which is something I'm trying to do, but it's not the main reason I started it, you know. So it's always coming back to why I started doing what I'm doing in the first place. And have there been moments like that for you where you had to just come back to that kid who started getting into his, you know, Slim Shady LP? You know, did you have to kind of take yourself back to those memories to remind yourself why you do what you do?
Yes, and you know, that definitely links.
Or the Eminem show, rather. That was
the Eminem. The Eminem show. That's so good. We know what you meant. But yeah, now for me, I'm actually doing that like right now, and I've had to do it quite recently over the last couple of years, because of my anxiety having been triggered, and me having to be really aware of my mental health, or a lot more than I had been before, because I always knew that the reason I was working so much is it's almost like I've just so happened to have fallen into this art work based off of my previous experience, like my own life, lived experience. And so I know that it's sort of all just for other people in terms of like those I come into contact with, in workshop settings, for example. But then in terms of anything that comes in sort of financially, makes a huge difference, like to my family, because I can, it was small things like a few years ago of just being able to cover one bill like a month. You know, I mean, that meant a lot to me. And then like with my siblings as well, but then also my parents. You know, of course, like life can be scary when we're thinking about like careers and stuff. And because I didn't go down a conventional route, I could see my parents resting a bit more, you know, feeling more comfortable with me taking risks, which mean that they became a little bit more relaxed with my other siblings and my younger siblings. You know, there was less stress on you have to do this. It's like a bit more.
Wait, are you the firstborn?
Yes and no. No, okay. I am the firstborn, but I grew up sort of know myself as the firstborn. So yeah, I've got older siblings, but yeah, I've never lived with them.
Oh, but, okay.
Yeah, no, I've had like younger siblings that I've looked up to me, and I've had to be like the bigger brother. So yeah, for me, in terms of looking back on, you know, why did I start doing this? I've had to do it recently because my creativity and the process just haven't been so stifled. And I've tried so many different techniques, you know, to really get me creating again. And one of them has been, let me ask the question again, you know, why am I doing this? Let me try to organically be reintroduced to me, or let it be reintroduced to me. It's almost like I need another Eminem CD to be handed to me by my mom, or some equivalent, so then I can start again. So yeah, that's been my reason to sort of looking back.
That's amazing. What I've realized, we've we're nearly 1 hour and a half into our conversation, but we've hardly talked on race. And you briefly mentioned racism, but I
Mm,
think that in itself is refreshing for me because you've heard the conversations I've had so far that race has been a huge component. But I think what's refreshing about this conversation is that, like we're just so different as human beings. Like just because someone has a certain ethnicity doesn't
mm,
automatically mean their ethnic experiences have impacted their mental health issues.
yeah.
So is that something you resonate with, like in terms of you feel like as a black person, you haven't really had that many struggles in terms of racism or it feeling racially alienated? Would you say that's kind of more of a secondary thing that you've struggled with, and there was other things that were um, kind of bigger issues for you?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting way to put it, and I guess
Mm,
I can definitely accept that, in that race as an issue
mm,
had become secondary for me, and that it's still an issue,
mm.
but it's not
Yeah.
the immediate thing. But I guess if I'm being honest, that is due
Mm,
to the way that I was living prior to
mm,
um, me being affected, because so as I said, like before,
mm,
I'm sort of raised, and even when things aren't great, I'm just always
mm.
smiling and always happy, and we're just dealing with things, like we're just getting into it.
Excuse me.
But then I'm always obviously aware of race. My parents have had the to talk with me about how I am going to be perceived because of my
Mm,
skin color, how people are going to treat me, and I need to work harder,
yeah.
all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and so, things are happening. White adults, white children calling me like the N word.
Oh
Um,
wow.
all of these things are happening, but as I'm growing up, my biggest issue isn't racism; it's
Mm.
discrimination. Like on the
Okay, let's
whole,
break that down. Let's
yeah,
break that down.
yeah.
Mm.
I'm realizing that I have an issue with the ultimate authority.
Right.
Um,
Mm,
you, you know, um, you may academically look at like the intersection of different communities and say that it is what we know as the patriarchy and
mm,
white supremacy that says that it is white people that is the ultimate race, and then it
mm.
is also white men and just
Yeah.
masculinity that is better
Mm,
than
mm,
anything that's not that is bad, particularly black people. And then you break that down as well. So for me, I'm like, I don't just want to remove the poison and what's brought out, which is so toxic,
mm.
is racism. I also don't want my mom,
Yeah.
my sisters, and my
Mm,
friends that are women. I don't want them to feel discriminated against. I don't want
yeah.
friends, like who identify with the LGBTQ plus
Hmm.
community. I don't want them to feel like to be threatened and in some countries
Yeah.
be killed. I
Yeah.
don't want people who are disabled to actually have a different lived experience because the world is set up for able-bodied people. So this is
Mm,
what I'm thinking, like from back a day. I'm like, with all of these things, like I'm not a woman. I don't identify with being part of the LGBTQ
yeah.
plus community. I don't have a disability that physically
Yeah.
stops me from operating on a day to day. But I am a black male, heterosexual.
Yeah.
So I have what people want to oppress me for, my race. But then I also have a certain privilege
Yeah.
could suppress other people, which is me
Yeah.
being male and being
Yeah.
heterosexual.
Yeah. And
So
being a Christian as well, that worldview, in a sense, is a
yeah,
privilege as well. Well, a massive privilege, really.
oh, that's really I haven't thought of that one. You might need to school me on that one. But that's
Mm.
interesting. Why would my Christianity be
In a
a privilege?
sense, in a sense. Yeah.
Mm,
Because it comes down to identity. And again, this is in my conversation with Paul and Ryan, uh,
mm,
where we talked. identity just kept coming up time and time again. And when you're caught in these situations where you're marginalized, you're marginalized in any way, you need some concrete sense of identity to come back to. And we were talking about culture. You know, popular culture is not a firm foundation to base your identity, which is, to be honest, which is what the majority of people in today's society do. We base our worth or identity on what is trending, seems to earn more money, what we see a certain celebrity doing. But people come and go, industries come and go. Clearly, COVID has proven that this world that we live in is crumbling apart, right? You know, and we rebuild things, but they crumble apart again. So it's, for me, my sense of identity is based on something beyond what I see, which means when I do go through something where it seems everything is falling apart, my world, the foundations of who I am and my self-worth haven't fallen apart, because that's not, my sense of worth is beyond what I see and what I feel. It's in a timeless sense of morality, which is the Bible. And, you know, not just the 10 Commandments, but the message of Jesus and salvation for all, and these timeless messages that to this day, regardless of the various specific cultures referenced to in the Bible, there's still so much resonance with the Bible across the whole world in the 21st century. And that says something about the universal nature of the gospel message. So for me, for that to be the core of my identity is a huge thing that, especially during this year, has helped me. And the thing about privilege is you might not be aware you have it until you have someone who doesn't have that privilege. And I'm sure you and me know a few people who, or have friends who are not Christians or weren't Christians, and they were struggling with something. And then you knew as a Christian, like, I don't have all the answers, but I know that this aspect of my faith could help with that situation. But because they don't have this bigger system of, not only do I believe there's something bigger, but I have an assurance there's something bigger because I've experienced, you know, his miracles for myself, or I've known people who have experienced miracles, or I felt my own sense of peace when singing a certain worship song or whatnot. So it's our own personal experience that help us make this faith even more real for us. And so when someone we know is like, even for like, I have a friend I've had a few people who said they contemplated suicide, but for me, I've never ever contemplated it. I don't know if it's the same for you. Have you ever contemplated it before? Or?
I mean, yeah, you know, you know, it definitely has gotten like to that stage. You know, like, because, you know, like in my experience, when I can't do what is fundamentally me, and obviously there's that creative aspect, and it's like, well, the fact that I can't start is okay, that's tricky. But then, you know, I base a huge part of my life like on being helpful and helping. And when I wasn't doing any of that, and I was feeling quite selfish, you know, a lot of my what I was being quite like active and positive in my life, when that was limited to nothing, I was absorbing that and translating it to that there is nothing, that I'm nothing. So at that point, it's okay. So then it wouldn't actually matter, would it?
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, that is definitely a process that I've been through like a couple of times.
And that's perfect, because again, we're not saying as Christians we never contemplate suicide. Like, we're still bone and flesh, we still get tempted, we still fail. But it's just, for the most part, like, when you have a certain amount of knowledge, there's just certain things that might not affect you as much as it might affect someone else without that knowledge, you know? So for me, to be fair, I've lived a pretty comfortable life in terms of, you know, my basic needs. I've never worried about where my next meal will come from. And that's a testament to my parents and their hard work, but also God's grace, I believe. So for me, from my perspective, I've had quite a privileged life. But then that's the thing, right? It's all about perspective. And like you touched on just now, it's very interesting in terms of how we define ourselves, right? And as a Christian, you know that there's more to who you are than what you do. Because before you ever even, the Bible even says, like, God knew us before we were formed in our mother's womb. And, Jeremiah 29:11 is quoted so many times. God has plans to deliver us and not to prosper us and not to harm us. So there's this resounding message in the Bible of even before we found our sense of worth in ourselves, there was already importance on us. God made us in his image. We already have an identity before we achieve anything on this planet. So that in itself is a very powerful thing that can help people separate who they are from what they do. The two are still related, but one doesn't always have to influence the other. That, like, even if what you do, it crumbles apart, there's still a firm foundation of who you are, because your worth is beyond just what you do and the physical things around you. So that in itself is a very deep topic, but that's kind of what I meant when I said Christianity is a privilege, and I think the whole thing we can summarize is everyone has privileges, which is a very powerful thing to think about. There's systematic racism and sort of your experiences growing up, people calling you the N-word. Those things are very real, but at the same time, so are your privileges. Everyone has a privilege. And it's the balance of, yes, I can acknowledge what I'm struggling with, but I always look at it from a step backwards in comparison to what my privileges are, always balancing the two, always looking for reasons to be grateful. And that's, again, I'm no mental health expert, but a lot of mental health stuff isn't, I think when it comes to mental health, we overcomplicate it, and we start thinking about someone working for the NHS asking all these clinical questions and all these clinical terms about how the brain works. But mental health is part of everything we do. And it's the solutions to our mental health problems might be more straightforward than we might originally think. So that's something I'm learning, as I'm speaking to different people and looking at different initiatives on social media. There's all sorts of everyday things that we take for granted, like taking a walk every day, drinking water, having enough sleep, spending less time looking at a screen. These are the basic things that we overlook, and we wonder, why am I in this space? But sometimes it's the small things, it's the fundamental things that help us in our mental health. Like even for you, reaching out to someone about your breakdown was, by the sounds of it, was enough for you to get to a healthy place again. And it sounds like you never really had to resort to getting a professional counselor, or is that something that you had to do?
Yeah. So I definitely did. I definitely did.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I did have some counselling sessions. A few years later on. Disclosed with my friends, and then I was just dealing with it personally. I did resolve to getting counselling sessions. I would definitely recommend. I know it may not be for everyone for a number of reasons, but I would definitely never say no to it.
Fair enough.
For the sake of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's a balance of what help do I need, but also what can I do as well. And it's always thinking about those two things. And I think that would really help a lot of us with our mental health issues, me included. So, very epic conversation we've just had. One final question. I know I did say we might deviate from our original questions, but from your point of view or experience, we're both passionate about the arts and the unique power of the arts in order to break down these stigmas on race and masculinity and everything. What initiatives have you been seeing recently that encourage you that we're on the right path in terms of using the arts to break down these stigmas, and thereby helping a lot of Black people's mental health? Are there things you're seeing or things that you would like to see more of? That's quite a deep question, but
no. It's yeah. I mean, I'll be totally honest. 2020, what a year it's been. People have had so many revelations, so many realizations, and of course, yeah, coming down to I feel like a lot of people's privileges and have been brought to the surface, and you're learning things about yourself. And another
true.
I've learned about myself, like my experience on race and having to talk on race with non-Black people. Like this year for me was like, I'm definitely done having the conversation now. Just because I thought for many years I had, had to explain to people why, like, you touch my hair, why you shouldn't do this, why you shouldn't do that. This year,
it's exhausting.
Yeah. And this year for me was like, okay, no, I'm done. I looked a lot into, obviously all of the initiatives happening. So obviously you had on social media with the Blackout Tuesday. Yeah. You would see companies putting out statements about how they are now going to be actively anti-Black. Who are hiring? Yeah.
I've seen the. Did you see the Uber poster? Did you hear about it?
No, not even.
I think there was I saw on Instagram, there's a poster from Uber, something along the lines of, if you are, if you don't stand against racism, or basically if you're racist, don't use our cabs. That was the message of it. So, sick. Yeah, I mean, like 2020 is just weird, man. I would not imagine seeing that from a big company like Uber last year.
No, and I'm very, very happy about it, because I do think, like, if you're still racist, bro, like, you need to get called out. Like, you need to get told straight up. Obviously, I wouldn't wish anything bad on you, but you just need to get told straight up. But yeah, like for me, like I'll be honest. What I've been really impressed with has been some of the individual conversations I've been able to be privy to. So there's an organization called Don't Settle that's really well connected with the organization I work with, Beat Freaks. So in the wake of what was going on this year with Black Lives Matter, what they had done, for example, is they open up a Zoom chat for Black people only, have conversation or just to listen. And I'm like, this is amazing, because literally everyone was venting, and it was just all these things. I've had quite a few friends message me, and I'm messaging them. We're checking in on each other. So those would be the positive things. I have been quite critical, because again, all of these organizations being like, okay, we're going to hire more Black people, we're going to do all this reading. For me, it's been like, how long is this going to actually going to last? And I think that a report, in America, I'll be happy to link you to it after. I believe YouGov and the Economist, where they found that back in June, the amount of white people that thought racism was a serious issue. It wasn't a massive, but it was it was quite high. It was like a higher percentage than before. But then in August, it dropped. White people again, or some white people again, were like, what's your problem? So this is what I'm critical for.
So just to tailor off from that, it's about long term. Is this working long term? That's the big question. I mean, there's always all sorts of ways to analyze 2020, and I'm sure there's loads of studies that have been done in terms of how lockdown has impacted people's compassion for one another, and maybe that's a factor that, because the whole world is experiencing this now, that's kind of emotionally helping us be more sympathetic. And there's all sorts of ways to assess it from a mental health perspective. But it's this question of, when everything dies down, are we just going to go back to life as it was before? We can't have that. That's what I've been thinking. We can't have all this Blackout Tuesday promoting Black Pound Day and all of that, and then just let it die down. We can't do that. And again, social media and the exposure we have to it is making us more aware of other cases such as Elijah McClain and Breonna Taylor. And even now we're seeing less and less and less being mentioned about Breonna Taylor, even though still her killers have not even been arrested. So as far as the last report I heard was one of them have been sacked, but that was it. So, you know, there's an organization that's been made specifically for this case. And it's like, only time will tell, really. Only time will tell what changes we're going to see. But one thing I do know is that as Black people, we need to be the change that we want to see. And again, it's about balance, that key word again, balance, because on one hand, you don't want to take on the whole weight of the world and be like, I have to fight against this. So, and then you oversaturate your mind with all this trauma of all these clips that we're seeing. And then that demotivates you to play your part. But at the same time, you don't want to be too desensitized either. You still want to communicate with other Black people and understand their experiences and empower your brethren. So it's the balance of the two, and realizing, for me, sometimes as a creative, I feel powerless. I feel like, what can I do to change the laws and change these institutions? But that's not a healthy place to start for my own mental health. I need to start with, what can I do? I'm good at animation. Obviously, through this rural media animation I'm doing, I will not transform the mental health of all young Black men in Britain, but just a few individuals here and there might be very empowered from it. And then it's a chain reaction. They might be able to do something that leads to a bigger result. And it's just focusing on the circle, what I can do now with the people that I'm connected to. Nothing that we do is too small. That's something I'm realizing, that this applies for everyone, but especially fellow Black creatives who are listening to this. Everything you do matters, but don't feel like you have to carry the whole world on your shoulders, you know, when you're doing it. You know, if you're good at baking cakes, bake cakes to the best ability you can, cheer up your friends, and everyone has social media. You still have a powerful platform to say what you want to say. Even if you don't want to use social media, there are people you can text, call, and encourage and be like, I found this organization that might help you with this, or just, relaying information. That's what I want to see young people do now. Young Black people and that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast, relay information. People from different practices and experiences are sharing their knowledge here. It's empowering different people. And I think that's the way forward, is networking, collaboration, like you've touched on earlier in our conversation. And if we all do our bit, that will help things progress. So that's the headspace I'm in now. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Do you want to just, is there anything you want to add to that in conclusion, or any concluding thoughts?
Yeah. Just to conclude, particularly like with what would be the next step in regards to how, as a society, we're going to deal with racism and how we're going to keep things going. I think, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said, in that as the community who society has to change for, I know there's lots of us, but right now we're talking about Black people, and we have to become the change that we want to see, but it is not solely our responsibility, and arguably it's actually
everyone
less.
Everyone has their part to play.
Exactly. There are such bigger issues that we have to face. On one end, during like 2020's Black Lives Matter movement, if you were part of a certain echo chamber, you might think that the whole world is agreeing to this, but then so many of us were just shocked to see the White Lives Matter protests that were then occurring, and hearing likes of government at the moment. Do you know what I mean? Talking about I think it was Dominic Raab who spoke about that taking of the knee seeming to be like something from Game of Thrones, talking about how he's only going to kneel for his wife and the Queen, and like he's part of like a really it's part of a leading government in the world. So I think we obviously know that there are forces that are so against this change, this positive change. But I do believe that if you are working against these things, you will end up on the wrong side of history. And you need to be very mindful of that, because if you know what you're doing and what you're supporting is wrong, it's only a matter of time when, love will conquer and positivity will win. And you don't want to lose feeling silly, like I shouldn't have supported this thing in the first place. But yeah, no, we are going to win. Amen
to that.
A lot of this is actually fake, and there's an incredible quote like from Toni Morrison, which I always come back to when I think about racism, and I realize that particularly as people who are affected by racism, like it's not our job, because Toni Morrison had said for like a talk in like 1975 at Portland State University. I'll share this with you after. It's a long talk, but it's a really famous quote which talks about the function. I'm paraphrasing, but the function of racism is distraction, and the fact that it keeps you from doing your work, it keeps you from explaining. It keeps you explaining like over and over again, justifying just your reason, because racism has made non-Black people, like in this case, ask, why is your hair like that? Why do you talk like that? Why do you dance like that? And when you have been given a purpose, with the example that you gave, to bake, when you've been given a purpose to write, a purpose to teach, all of these things, but you are constantly having to explain why you're a human being. You know what I mean? Like, why your hair's like that. It's a distraction. It's stopping you from making an impact on the world. So that's something I come back to a lot from the late to Toni Morrison, that the function of racism is distraction, and it is to distract us beautiful melanated people from doing some incredible work, but we will not be stopped.
Nice. I love that. Let's end it right there. We will not be stopped. So if people wanted to reach out to you to know more about what you do or anything like that, how can they get in contact with you, or any fellow creatives or anything? If people wanted to collaborate with you in any way, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, if anyone wanted to collaborate with me and just link up, first of all, share Nathan's podcast. Let's get this out there.
Thank you. Yeah.
To hear this. So my name, which will probably be like in the description or something. It's Sipho Ndlovu. You can type that in on Google. I'm on LinkedIn primarily, but then I have an email address, and people get in contact with me, and I always respond. So shout me. I'll be on LinkedIn at Sipho Eric in Ndlovu, and you'll see the one with descriptions about being a creative in some sense. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining us, Sipho, and to all those listening. Again, please message me I'm on Instagram, Twitter. You can see that in either the general description for this podcast or the specific description for this episode. You can follow me on those social media platforms. Please message me. Let me know how this content is helping you. We're out. So thank you guys for listening.